The Objective News Network? The sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. Who's the culprit? Last September, the Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2 near the Danish island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea were blown up. Nord Stream 2 was not yet operational at the time. Investigators from Sweden and Denmark concluded that was an act of sabotage. Last week, Pulitzer Prize author Seymour Hersh, quoting an anonymous source, said that the United States was responsible. Since then, the U.S. government has denied all involvement. World leaders, technical experts, and engineers are nearly unanimous that the pipelines were attacked by a planned, powerful underwater explosion of a highly complex nature, suggesting that the operation required the means and methods of a state actor versus terrorists. But as of today, the question still remains: who had the most to gain in sabotaging the Nord Stream pipelines? First, there's Russia. Well, Russia had something to lose, and it had something to gain. On the downside, the pipelines were a joint Russian-German effort, costing $23 billion. It would have provided the Russians with needed revenues. By blowing up the pipeline, Russia would immediately have lost its leverage over much of Europe. Why would you blow up your own property? From another point of view, however, at a time when winter was approaching, the cutoff of the Nord Stream supplies of natural gas could have played a significant role in sending the United States and its allies in Europe a clear and unmistakable signal that the West had crossed a red line and that Russia was in it, meaning the war in Ukraine, for the long term. But then again, why blow up your own pipeline when you can simply shut off a valve? Or how about the British? On the downside, if the British acted unilaterally and got caught, it would severely damage its position with the Germans and in NATO generally. If they had the best interests of Ukraine in mind, getting caught blowing up a multi-billion-dollar German investment might not be the best idea. On the upside, the Brits are the strongest supporters of Ukraine in NATO. Britain would not be as directly affected by the termination of Russian natural gas supplies. In 2022, Russian gas and oil consumption in Britain was less than 4%, at about $2.2 billion in 2022. The British are keen on strong ties to the West and the United States and would have coordinated any effort with the United States. Okay, what about Ukraine? On the downside, if Ukraine were caught sabotaging a major European source of energy, the political consequences would be severely damaging and cause them to lose critical NATO support at a time when they needed it desperately. On the upside, with the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines out of commission and the people of Europe feeling threatened by Moscow, the Ukrainian alliance with NATO and Europe would have only been strengthened. Or how about the other Baltic states? On the downside, the Baltic states are experiencing tensions with Russia, but blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines would not endear them to the rest of Europe or NATO, should they be caught blowing up a multi-billion-dollar Russian-German-owned pipeline on their own. On the upside, however, they may have perceived the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines as a possibly important step to stop the future dependency of NATO members in Europe, like Germany, on Russian supplies of energy. Now, How about the United States? Many people in the United States, for many different reasons, do not like the idea of providing Russian natural gas to Europe. First, many feared that it would make an energy-hungry Europe more dependent on Russian energy supplies, a sort of energy blackmail situation, if you will. Second, it would have given the Russians a source of badly needed revenues. Both President Trump and now President Biden have publicly and in the strongest terms opposed the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines because they integrate the economy of Russia and the European Union around critical energy supplies. It was President Biden himself who said, and I quote, "If Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring it to an end." Close quote. At a White House press conference, President Biden made the specific point that the U.S. was able to shut down Nord Stream 2 in the Baltic Sea if Russia dared to invade Ukraine. On February 7, 2022, a video was reposted on Twitter where a reporter asked President Biden, and I quote, "But how will you do that exactly, since the project is in Germany's control?" Biden said, and again I quote, "I promise you, we will be able to do that." Close quote. Now, it's pretty clear that the U.S. and some of its NATO allies had at least a compunction to sabotage the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, if only they could mitigate against the risk of getting caught. That's what's so interesting about Seymour Hersh's recent claims about possible U.S. involvement in the sabotage. The United States, unlike other members of the NATO alliance, appears to have a lot less to lose than others in sabotaging the pipelines, and much more to gain geopolitically. When Russia moved forward with the invasion of Ukraine, the United States vociferously came to Ukraine's defense. The U.S. is not dependent on supplies of Russian energy. Not much to lose there, at least in the short term. On the downside, however, Russia could view U.S. involvement as an act of war, as if they don't believe we are really already at war with them. Under the circumstances, and to mitigate against the risk of exposure, the U.S. would simply clandestinely coordinate the sabotage with several like thinking of its allies to preclude any surprises. On a blog written by Seymour Hersh at Substack, he alleges that American Navy divers planted remotely triggered explosives that severely damaged 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines built to carry natural gas from Russia to Europe. Hersh goes on to allege that the U.S. Navy planted the explosives under the cover of a NATO maritime exercise called Baltic Operation 22, known as Baltops, which involved vessels from 14 NATO member states and exercises that took place in the Baltic Sea between June 5th and June 17th in 2022. That concludes our story for today. Next time, we are going to assume the United States did in fact lead the clandestine sabotage by NATO on the Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2 and ask ourselves the important question: was it the right or the wrong thing to do? It is what it is for February 16th, 2023. This is John Nasha reporting for the Objective News Network. At ONN, we strive to give you a deeper look at the important news stories of the day. Please share our work with your family, friends, and colleagues. We look forward to seeing you the next time.